Welcome to This Week in Habsland. I am Jordan and I am joined by my co-host Brian, and we are here each Monday to discuss all things Montreal Canadiens. Find us on social media at Blue Sky and TikTok at Habsland Pod. Brian, 3 games this past week. I will say just generally the vibes are continuing to trend upwards as they have for the past 5 or 6 weeks. There's one absolutely huge reason for that, and we'll get into that in our headlines. But overall, this was a fun week of hockey, was it not?
Absolutely. Jordan, before I even get into your question, I want to thank you, first of all, for covering the Boston game on last week's episode. You did a great job. And it also made it so that we can talk about a winning week for the Montreal Canadiens, going 2-1. If not for that, it's even, and that Boston game throws a wrench in the works, because all 3 of the games that they played this week were excellent. They played a really, really good week. Obviously, a giant, monstrous part of that, both in stature and in just the monumentalness of that moment of Laine coming back. That's absolutely insane. You could probably hear at home, my voice sounds like crap. I apologize. I'm sick a little bit right now. So for the next hour, you'll have to just sort of maybe try and listen to what the words I'm saying and not so much to the tone of my voice because it's crap, but little apologies for that. But yeah, I could say that I got my sore throat from screaming as loud as I could at the refs this week because they didn't really improve. But on the plus side, the Montreal Canadiens found a way to beat the opposing team and the refs, which is really nice. Not that I really think they needed to do that in Montreal against Nashville. That game was just, the Habs are a better team than Nashville, which, who would have predicted that at the beginning of the season after all the moves that they made? Kind of insane. But yeah, all in all, fantastic week for the Montreal Canadiens. Laine had an amazing week. So did Suzuki. Evans played great. On the blue line, Hudson doing Hudson things as usual. And Montembeault just standing so tall after getting the call to be a part of the Four Nations face-off, which definitely deserved. We called that we didn't think it was going to happen, but that we wanted it to happen, and it did. So I am absolutely thrilled about that. We're going to get into all these things that I've mentioned in different segments here. But do you have anything to add on just how great this week was?
I guess just briefly that it was like experiencing a new sensation during the Habs games this week, and specifically that Nashville game. It was the first time this season where I was feeling, when it was 1-0 for quite a while, of, oh boy, the Habs only have a 1-goal lead here. They're at risk of one ugly goal makes it 1-1, and before you know it, you might lose this game. That feeling of their lead's not as big as it should be has been absent all year until that Nashville game, where it was they should be winning more than 1-0 right now. 3-0 was a much more appropriate final scoreline. But it was just for whatever it was, 20, 30 minutes of gameplay where I was like, why is it only 1-0? It should be a lot better right now. We'll get into the Washington game, but it was a similar vibe of they're actually playing quite well right now. I think overall it's been better over the past 5-6 weeks. Baby steps. It's not going to always be linear, but there's going to be really strong moments. It was one of their best weeks of the season easily. So with that said, Brian, let's get into our headlines. What was your main headline? What's your top headline of the week?
The main headline has to be the Laine effect.
Yes.
And I'm calling it the Laine effect and not just Laine returns and scores 2 and 2, or, it's not only centered on Laine, because what I failed to predict, and what I think a lot of people failed to predict, was the boost that the rest of the team got when Laine returned. And I've sort of been thinking about it this way for the past few days of anybody listening right now, you've been on a team, whether it's a hockey team or another sports team or your team at work or at school or your family, trying to accomplish a task. When you're trying to accomplish a task with a group of people as a team, how monumental is it when an incredibly skilled and smart member joins your team? Yeah. If you're a sports team and you trade for somebody incredible like this, who's just an elite scorer in the case of Laine, it's just such a boost. And I failed to predict that. I was thinking, the guys who play with Laine directly are going to benefit. Mm-hmm. So Slavkovsky and Doc, for instance, they benefited. I think they had a better week. All the bugs are still not worked out with those 2 guys. They still need to step it up, but they're making steps in the right direction. And the power play would improve. We said that as well. We knew that the power play and the top 6 were going to improve. What I failed to predict was that the entire team was going to play better. That's a huge thing. So obviously there's the 2 goals that Laine scored, absolute snipes. Last week we did, in very quick fashion, you brought up, well, who are the top 5 shots on the team? Who has the best shot? And we put Caufield in the 1 spot. 3 games in, I may have to switch that for Laine. And we did say, like, historically, Laine has the better shot. It's just we hadn't seen him in a Habs jersey yet. So we had to, just out of respect for Caufield, give him the one spot. But Jesus Christ, Patrik Laine, 2 unbelievable shots. The sound of his first goal, that might be the most beautiful sound I've heard in Habsland in years, Jordan.
Yeah. The Laine's return, just in funny contrast to what we said last week, was very much the Michael Jordan, and I took that personally meme, where we put him at number 2 and he was like, okay, all right, well, here you go. Here's 2 absolute beauty of a shots, and they both go in the net. It's the intangibles of sport. That's what the Laine effect was this week. Of you don't know how to quantify what it is to get a guy who was the biggest offseason acquisition on the team this year, a guy who was there through most of training camp and then early into the preseason, and there was great feeling of having him on the team. He was excited to be back, and he'd gotten over his own personal journey had brought him to Montreal for a fresh start, and then it was wiped away for a moment, but like the light was still flickering, right? Of course, there's opening night with the suit, with the ovation, and then for him to come back, essentially for him to come back for the 5-game homestand that the Habs are currently on, perfect timing, and he's delivered. Now, I do think there's a bit of a dividing line we do have to make between the 5-on-5 play and the power play, because at 5-on-5, the numbers for the Doc, and we're obviously 100% getting into Doc in part 2, but just to say, as it affects Patrik Laine, 5-on-5 has still not been great for that second line. It has still been struggling. Parking that though, like, this is what a number 1 power play should look like. Notice that, and when I recorded last week about the Boston game, I expressed my disappointment with Mike Matheson going back to the first wave of the power play. I thought it was the perfect opportunity. He missed the game. It's time to put Hudson on power play 1. We're done. I guess Marty was just waiting for Laine to come back and just make like a double swap. So that way it's like, it's not just Matheson being demoted, it's Matheson and Kirby Dach.
Yeah.
Now you see it with this power play. Now you are seeing 5 guys on the ice where you're like, at any given moment, one of them can do something special from a skill perspective. I don't want to say score, because Slav has been struggling this year to put the puck in the net, and Hudson is still not broken through the goose egg.
Right.
But just overall, generally, when any one of those 5 guys now on the ice have the puck in the offensive zone, I am comfortable in saying, well, they're going to make the right call. They're going to use their skill, their creativity, and slowly their chemistry with the other guys on the ice to find the right spots, find the right spaces. Laine scoring this week is a bit of an indication of that. Like, the skill's just there. Hudson's now there. So that was part of like the element that I've chosen to focus more on is like, this is a real power play. This is the best quality power play the Habs have had since peak Markov and Subban.
Which, on that note, very, very nice honoring of Andrei Markov in the Bell Center. Loved that. Absolutely loved that. You could tell how moving it was for him and what an emotional moment that was. You never would have seen that under the regime of Baby Bergevin, who essentially ended his career with the Montreal Canadiens. So I'm thrilled to see that he got his due in terms of the crowd giving him the love that he absolutely deserves. And I don't know if he knew he was going to get it, and he also wanted to sort of honor another guy who was in the 990 games range in Plekanec with the turtleneck. But that was nice as well. Looking good, Andre. You look like you could step in and play those last 10 games with the Montreal Canadiens if you wanted to, though I doubt that would happen. Sorry to cut you off. I just had to give some love to Andrei Markov.
No, thank you for bringing that up. You're right. That it's been nice to see with Plekanec and Markov in the importance of, and this is a sidetrack, right? But the importance of bringing back club alumni. We saw it actually this week with another team, with the Ottawa Senators, where they brought Danny Heatley back, who had been basically kicked out of the franchise in any capacity with the previous ownership. Now Andlauer is in, and they welcome Heatley back. It's important to have Danny Heatley and Jason Spezza and Daniel Alfredson all together, because those guys understands what it is to be, members of that team. Same goes for Andrei Markov, for Thomas Plekanec. Those guys spent almost 1,000 games with the Montreal Canadiens. Like, they know how important it is. Carey Price, even when the contract is over, will still make appearances here and there. Paul Byron's another guy who's on, like, basically in some capacity involved in the front office. It's great to have alum around. Gallagher is going to be that guy in 5 years as well.
Yep.
It's important to do it. This regime has been very open about it, not only having the guys from the 70s and 80s and 90s, but also having guys from the 2010s, because it's important to have a different mixture of alum. Bringing it back to Laine and maybe to close it off. It's been a really promising start. I have no doubt it will continue. I saw there's an over-under on 19.5 goals for the season. I'll just say, like, pump the brakes a bit on that, because there'll be some struggles. Again, it's not going to be a linear progression the whole season, but it's great to have him back. It's great to have a guy who's worked so hard to make it back to this spot and immediately finding some level of success with the team, and also the crowd. Not that we're surprised, but the Bell Center crowd and Habs fans in general embracing him completely and wholly.
And he seems like he thrives under that environment. The pressure, that Fowler quote, we're going to use it again. Pressure is a privilege. And I think Laine embraces the pressure that the fan base in Montreal, wantingly or not, puts on players. We just love hockey too much, I think. We love hockey so much that we put this undue pressure on some players. But Laine seems to be thriving under it. Hudson seems to be thriving under it. We have a core of young players. I mean, Laine's basically entering his prime at the moment at 26 years old, but still young, still got a huge runway. He's definitely got more in him than he's done so far. So this young group of players who thrive under pressure, and that's such a welcome sign when you compare it to perhaps some players, and I don't want to name names, but some players in the past that we've had who that pressure got to them in ways that made their play suffer. And I don't think that we're going to see that with these guys. I think that they're going to take the onus on themselves when they're not playing well. And when they are playing well, a lot of that confidence is going to come from the crowd, from the fan base, all these things. One more thing I want to mention that I hadn't really planned on doing, but Trouba got moved in a very disgusting sort of way from the New York Rangers this week. He gets traded to the Anaheim Ducks. They basically told him either accept a trade or you're on waivers. And I want to contrast this with the way that the Montreal Canadiens management group works. Players are going to want to come here. There's another Original Six team in New York that players are very soon not going to want to go there because of the way that they're treating their players. Their captain, Jacob Trouba, you hate him if you want. I do. I don't like him as a player. He's a headshot artist. He elbows. He's dirty. There are people who disagree with me. There's people that love him. Fair enough. Whatever. I don't care. But the contrast between our management group and their management group, I think, is such that within a few years, and especially seeing how well Laine is integrating into our team, star players are going to want to come here. And we're going to have the cap necessary to sign them in a few years. Once Carey is off the books, once Gallagher and Anderson are off the books, and perhaps Gallagher is signed to a new contract for less money, something more along the lines of a third, fourth line player like he's become. So all this to say that the future is very bright in terms of signing free agents, because it hasn't always been that way. Either we haven't been ballsy enough to do it, or we just haven't had players want to come here well enough because of the tax or whatever it is, or Bergevin. Now I think that's going to change.
Right. And just to close the loop on that, because now that he's on the Anaheim Ducks, Jacob Trouba will be in town on Monday. So that means Josh Anderson, you're up again. It's time to go for round 2 or round 3, depending on how you interpret the first fight.
That's true. He probably thought he was going to get a nice little break now. Okay, we don't play the Rangers for a good 5, 6, 7, 7-ish weeks. So I can relax, rest my fists. Sorry, buddy. You got to get back in there.
Back up. Numbers up. Okay. So my main headline of the week is there's an opening. And what I'm referring to is we've been calling this out for probably a month at this point, if not longer. There is a moment in time where the Montreal Canadiens schedule will turn for about 5 or 6 weeks and become incredibly difficult. However, before that, we have 7 games to play. And I think based on the way the team has been playing so far, and I do want to integrate some talk about the Washington game into here, but for all intents and purposes, over the next 7 games, you could strongly assume the Canadiens are going to be favorites in most of those games, with the exception of one. I believe it's at Winnipeg. But beyond that, there's back-to-backs with Detroit. There's a Columbus game, Anaheim we've mentioned briefly, Pittsburgh. There's a lot of winnable games. And I'm not saying they're going to go 6-1 here, but like a 4-2-1 or a 5-2, completely within the realm of possibility. They're at 23 points in 27 games. I'm not sure they can fully get all the way back to point per game and back to that 80-point pace we thought they would be at all season, but it's certainly there. There's an opening for it. And maybe tying that into the Washington game, like I really want to contrast the last two games they've played against the Capitals. If you go all the way back, I think it might have been on Halloween where they lost 6-3. That was one of their bigger defensive sieve games of the season. Game was actually also very similarly, like it was a 3-3 tie going into the third period. Similarly here, it wasn't tied going into the third period, but it became tied in the third period at 2-2. But I think it's a pretty like big difference in terms of like the amount of opportunities they're conceding nowadays has gone way down. Quite honestly, well, how many breakaways were there or partial breakaways were there in the second and third period?
5, Jordan. 5.
Like, there's Jaden Struble. There was Josh Anderson. Okay, not the best options. There was a Nick Suzuki one. Well, that was grade A. Brendan Gallagher had a hell of a chance. And I'm missing whoever the fifth one is.
I think Caufield. Wasn't it Caufield took a good shot, but just got stopped? Thompson had a phenomenal game.
Logan Thompson's on his...
those 5.
Yeah. He's on his revenge tour for not making Team Canada, and like can't blame him for it. Jordan Binnington probably shouldn't be on the team, but we knew that was going to happen. I think the team played a great 45, 50 minutes. You could feel the better team starting to like rev up starting about halfway through. But like it did go from 2-0 to 4-2, but it wasn't in a way that was decisive, right? It was just slowly and incrementally in a bad bounce here or there. And like Gooley on, I think it was the first or the second, it was the first Wilson goal, I think, where he just loses his footing at the blue line. And then weird bounces happen and it goes in the net. So I think they're playing really good hockey. Like the Washington game was a great test. And yes, they still lose the game compared to a little over a month ago. The way in which they're losing is much different. And these next 7 games is the opportunity to just let's get back up to a relatively more appropriate standings. Of right, they're 10, 14, and 3. Can they be something like 14, 16, and 4, or 15, 15, and 4, or I don't know, something like that before they get into that death stretch? I think there's an opening right now. Ryan, are you seeing the same thing?
Well, it's hard to not see an opening like this when 4 or 5 points separates the bottom from the wild card spot. Like any team could just get hot and jump into the mix. So. Yeah. I mean, we're all kind of laughing about the management group using the terms in the mix in the offseason and before this season started, but we're like 3rd or 4th from the bottom in points percentage, and yet we're somehow still very close to being in the mix. So as far as seasons go, where a team could be close without necessarily giving away futures, and we're in this sort of nice position right now where depending on how the next few weeks go, you can really wait a while before making a decision. This isn't one of those seasons where we're 3rd from the bottom 30-ish games in. They played 27 games, but we're close to the bottom 30-ish games in. We're going to have to start trading away good assets, getting some future assets, because this is a tank year, for lack of a better word. We're not in that position right now. Habs win, 7 out of the next 10, which, yes, incredibly difficult to do, but they've been playing better hockey. If they were to do it, they're back in the mix. So no decision needs to be made yet. And that's really nice for the team's morale as well. Like, it sucks to be at the bottom of the standings and you're 12 points out of a wild card spot this early in the season. That's not the case right now. It's 4 or 5 points. It's a few games that you play better than the guys above you, and suddenly you're in the mix. I do want to talk about the Washington game just in terms of a singular lesson that I think can be taken from this game. You don't sit on your heels when you have a lead against a top team like that. You don't alter the way that you're playing. They played maybe not a better game than the Capitals in the first 2 periods, but they were certainly on pace with them and on par with them, and they were battling really hard. Then the third period comes and they sit on their heels a little bit, and that just allows Washington's really very good forecheck to take advantage of them. And then they get some rush chances and the bounces, like you said, and suddenly it's a tie game, and then Washington's in the lead, and you're like, whoa, what happened? Well, you sat on your heels a little bit. You know what I mean? You're sitting on your hands thinking, if we just defend, we can win this game at the score that it currently is. That's not the way the NHL works. Certainly not against the top team. Like that may have worked against Nashville, but it didn't work against the Capitals. So that's a good lesson. In a rebuild, that's a great lesson to take, especially as you go into that death stretch where there's a span of 16 games and 14 of those are against either absolute contenders or at the very least wild card playoff teams. Yeah.
So on that stretch, let's get into it just briefly. I'm counting it as the next 17 games. You can cut it to 21 games. You can cut it to 16 games. I had it at 17. There's 4 sets of back-to-backs. The home away split's actually not bad. There is a big road trip at the front end, but ultimately, this harder stretch is basically till the end of January. I'm counting 3 games where they might be favorites of those 17. At Chicago, I think that'd be pretty safe to assume they'll be favorites.
Yeah.
Assuming goaltending, asterisk with Primo. at Utah, and maybe at Detroit. Though they might be favorites in those 3 games.
Maybe. I mean, the Utah game at home didn't go great for us, so on the road, I don't know if it would. But yeah, that's it.
It's a road record right now of 3-8-1. So there are 3 easier games. All happen to be on the road. It's going to be a rough stretch. The one other thing I did want to bring up is Boston, unfortunately, has bounced back. It's terrible news for the world. Beyond that, the 2 wildcard spots, you could interpret them as up for grabs. I do think we are walking towards a very similar scenario we saw in 2022, where there was a 16-point gap between essentially the 8th place team, wildcard spot number 2, and the 9th place team, where I think it was Washington was at 100 points that year and 84 points was the Islanders, something like that. I think we're marching towards that already, because if you just look at points percentage, you have both the Rangers and the Lightning on pace for mid-90s, and then you take a step down. Again, points percentage is really early, but there's already a gap forming between the next group. Not saying that's going to stick. So like, I don't know what, just for like, I this whole season, like the title of this season is like, are we in the mix basically? If the Canadiens are making their way towards 85 points, but they're 15 points off a wild card spot, but they're also 3 points off of 9th. I don't know how we interpret that as in the mix, but just something like to keep in mind as like, as we keep going, will there be as hard of a stratification as we saw 3 seasons ago between 8th and 9th? And what does that mean for our interpretation of the Canadiens' growth this season? We'll see. Last headline of the week. We'll do a co-headline like I think we tend to normally do. Brian, what is it?
So on our sheet, we have 4 nations makes and misses as the headline. And I just in this moment thought of a better one, Jordan. My headline, our headline, should in fact be Nick Suzuki and Cole Caufield on the beach in February. Both guys definitely deserve a break. They're playing incredible hockey for the Montreal Canadiens. Both got slighted by their respective countries. The reasons behind which either guy got slighted we're going to get into, certainly. But I think that they could both probably deserve a break hanging out as best buds on the beach somewhere down south, get a nice little break, and then come back fresh after that. On the plus side, and I'll let you do the positive element, there were a few guys that did make their respective countries' teams.
Yeah, so maybe let's do briefly on those guys to start off with, because the bigger story is Suzuki and Caufield. However, Yoel Armia and Patrik Laine making Team Finland completely makes sense. Armia, I think, to people who aren't as in tune to the Habs, and also to like just the depth of Team Finland, I guess, would kind of been like a little shocked about that. Armia has played pretty good hockey at the Worlds in the past for Finland. I'm thinking specifically to the 2023 Worlds, I believe. Even in 2022, I might be getting my years wrong, but he's had good tournaments for Finland. I'm sure that mattered to their hockey association.
When he gets the call, he's like Eric Lindros. He's Yoel Armia on the Canadiens, and then he goes to the Worlds, and he's Eric Lindros for Finland. So
completely makes sense. Bottom 6 guy, going to kill penalties. And also, like, Finland just doesn't have that much depth, right? It's nowhere near any of the other teams. Sweden's probably similar, but... And then Patrik Laine, I guess I had completely put that out of my mind. I don't think we mentioned him once in the past when we've discussed 4 nations. Because I think we just forgot, like, he's going to be hurt or like, anyway, so he makes it. Great. It just makes watching, like, getting excited to watch the Finland games just a little bit more now, because like, Patrik Laine is going to be on that team. Curious to see what his role is going to be on that team of like, does he make a top 6? Is he more of like a third line winger? We'll see how it shakes out. Super pumped for those guys. Anything you want to touch on the Finland duo before we get over to Monté-le-Mur?
Not really. I mean, if to sort of bridge this story, if Monty's not the starter for Canada, I'm probably going to be cheering for Finland a little bit.
There we go.
Maybe not against Canada, but certainly against the other teams. I think Finland is my second favorite now.
Yeah, I mean, certainly.
They have to be.
They have to be at this point. It's an easy call. So yeah, Samuel Montembeault makes the team along with Jordan Binnington and Aiden Hill. Presumption will be that Monty is the third. So really unlikely to matter in a 3 to 4 game tournament. But I think there's an opening, certainly, if Monty, who has had really good stretches of series, tied for the league lead in shutouts last I checked. That might have been updated recently, but him and Hellebuyck both had 3. There's a universe where Monty now, like, the first audition was to make the team. And also, like, this is a bit of a through line, but Monty's also played for Team Canada at the Worlds. Like, we're obviously going to get to that element of Suzuki later on, and Caufield to a different extent. But Monty went to the Worlds in 2023. He won a gold medal. He was their starting goalie. He wasn't incredible or anything, but he was a strong, serviceable starting goalie for that tournament, and they won it. The first audition was to make the team. He has made it. Now there's a 3-way race. I would think it's open for interpretation as to, is this Binnington's to lose? Is it like it's Binnington's regardless? Or is there a legitimate opportunity in these next 8 to 12 weeks for both Hill and Montembeault to get that starting job?
The people making that decision would be very stupid to not treat this as a 3-horse race. They would essentially, on top of the nepotism and all these other things that we're seeing with the Team Canada, the politics within who gets picked for Team Canada, on top of all that, if they just go, okay, well, it's Binnington, and then these other 2 guys will back him up, and if Binnington gets hurt, that's when they come in. We're hedging our bets. That's incredibly stupid. You play who's hottest. You play who's playing their best hockey.
Yeah.
To me, it's that simple. And if that guy's not Montembeault at the time, fair enough. I'll step aside. Like, if it happens to be Binnington, which I guess he's got a 1 in 3 chance, but my money's on Hill or Monty.
Mm-hmm.
If it's Binnington, it's Binnington. Great. Good for you, man. Yeah, have at it. You know, you're hot. Keep playing. If it's Hill, great. If it's Monty, great. Like that's really the attitude they should be having. They've made their 3 picks. I think a more important decision is who's the starter, but it should be an obvious decision. It should be just who's hottest. And if all 3 of them are playing good hockey, even better. Yeah. Even better. Then it makes their decision even harder. You know, we'll see what comes of that, but I'm praying that it's not like I've been seeing on the socials all the time. Like, why didn't they just pick Fleury as the third if he's not going to play anyway? No, when you don't have a Carey Price, you have to pick 3 good goaltenders so that they battle for the spot so that you can create a pseudo Carey Price for a couple weeks. You know what I mean? Like, you want one of these guys to fight so hard for their opportunity that they become a better goalie. That's really what you're striving for. It's that simple.
Yeah. Let's get into Caufield before we go to Suzuki. Let's do Caufield first. I will say these 2 statements, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. Cole Caufield is the leading goal scorer among American-born players right now with 17 goals. Also, Cole Caufield not making Team USA is not surprising to me, given the makeup of the team right now. Do you agree with both of them? I mean, the first statement's not a statement, it's a fact. But the second one is, it still makes sense that he didn't make the team, right?
It makes sense. I'm not happy about it. We can be not happy about it, but we can also be rational people and understand that he doesn't fit in the bottom 6.
Yeah.
And in the top 6,
there's no space in the top 6. Can we just end that right away?
Of course.
You have 2
Yeah,
Kachucks, and you can argue whether Brady should be involved. But let's just say the 2 Kachucks, you have Eichel, you have Matthews, you have Jack Hughes, and then pick any other winger you want to throw in there. Like, it's full. There's no space. Yep. So he would have to be a bottom 6 guy. And like, I did hear one interesting comment about the fact that like Team USA's defense lacks size. They don't lack skill. Like Adam Fox, Quinn Hughes are a problem, and they will be a problem. But there's not that much size on the defensive end of Team USA. And that may be part of the way they put the bottom 6 together was they had to kind of overcompensate a little bit on size. And that's why Kreider's there, why Trocheck's not the biggest guy, but Trocheck's, he's a brick wall. And that's maybe part of the reason why Cole Caufield just didn't fit on this team, despite the fact that, yes, he has one of the best shots in the NHL. Certainly from Team USA standpoint, he would have 3rd, 4th best shot. I don't know, like certainly put Matthews above him, but after that, it's probably it's starting to become a pretty tight race, but I get it. I understand it. I agree. Like I would have preferred Cole Caufield to be on the team, but he was also at the World Championships in 2024. He didn't play that well. So
no,
that was his audition, and it didn't go great. And he's been awesome this year, and he's on pace for 40 plus, but didn't make the team.
If nothing else, it keeps his focus in Montreal. Yeah. It allows for him to get a rest when he definitely deserves it. And yeah, it sucks, but he'll probably get more opportunities in the future as well as he continues this. Like if he next year is still the leading or one of the leading American-born scorers, does he make a better case for being in their top 6? I think certainly. So there's still opportunities, and next year there's no way Trocheck and Kreider are getting the call. They shouldn't have this year, even if it's not Caufield. Like I'm appalled that it was those 2 guys. Maybe I'm the one who's biased. I'm definitely biased against Kreider, but Trocheck, really, like that's the guy you want? All right, man. Give Canada an easier path, I suppose.
Yeah,
that's the way I'm looking at it.
It'll also depend. What'll be very interesting with these 4 rosters, but I think specifically USA and Canada, is how they are affected a year from now based on the result of this tournament. Two quick things on Caufield. Scored his 98th career goal on Saturday against the Capitals, which means he's obviously making his way towards 100. Brian, quick trivia question. How many Montreal Canadiens have scored 100 goals?
Like in history?
In the history of the franchise.
This is fun.
Suzuki
I want to say
and Gallagher are the only two active above 100. Armia is somehow close on that list. He's not too far behind Caufield, but those are the only two actives right now.
I know there have been about 1,000 players for the Canadiens. 600 have scored goals for the team because we found out this week Laine was the 600th Hab to score a goal. It can't be more than like, I want to say 145.
Wow. So you overshot quite a bit. It's 62.
That's it?
There have been 62 100 goal scorers
Wow.
as Montreal Canadiens. Serge Savard is number 62 right now with exactly 100. So Caufield will make that 63. Yeah, it's a tough one. Like I would say that when I was doing this in complete like transparency, my guess was like low 50s actually. So I went the other way. I was like, maybe it's like 51 or 52. It was a bit hard. So it's basically 1 in 10 goal scorers. When you score for the Montreal Canadiens, you have a 1 in 10 chance of creeping over 100. That's one way of looking at it.
Okay, yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Let's do Nick Suzuki quickly. We can have time to talk about this at a later session. Suzuki not making Team Canada, I think, comes down more to how Team Canada wanted to construct their team rather than Nick Suzuki's play in itself. It's not, I don't find it to be a similar conversation to Caufield, where Caufield, it's like he needed to be top 6, borderline top 9, whereas Suzuki, we thought could be a 4C. Before I go into my thoughts, I want you to maybe like, how'd you feel about the decision to leave Nick Suzuki off Team Canada?
I hate this one flat out. I hate it. I think it's an awful decision for Canada. I think that the team will suffer. I think there was no better candidate as a defensive center. Not that that's all Nick Suzuki is, but as you said a few weeks ago when we talked about it, if you task him with that, he'll be great. And if not Nick Suzuki, it should have been Jake Evans. That's the other thing I'll say about this. No, I'm kidding, obviously. But he's playing some incredible defensive hockey as a center. But Nick Suzuki played his 400th game in his career, which speaks to his incredible Ironman streak because all 400 of those games are in succession from his rookie game, the first game he ever played till now. He hasn't missed one. So it's not about durability. I'm going to disagree with you. I don't think it's either of the two things that you said. I'm wondering if Team Canada, the management group, are still butthurt that he said no.
Yes. Well, first of all, the answer to that is absolutely. They're definitely holding that. Maybe not holding it against them. That might be too strong of a way, but I'm certain
he
it
didn't
came
make
into
the team when he deserved. He didn't make the team when he deserved to be there. That's holding it against him. I'm sorry. Like that's anyway. He wanted to propose. He wanted to make the woman that he loves his fiance. So him. You're not coming to the next tournament because you said no to the first one because you wanted to make this incredible family milestone. Like you're starting a like. Come on, man. How can you be so opaque?
Yeah.
As the management group of Team Canada, like, and Cirelli, really? Like that's the nepotism I was talking about before, the Tampa Bay, because there's that connection. I don't know. I just think it's a bad call. Maybe I'm too close to it. Maybe I love Nick Suzuki too much. Right. There's no maybes actually in either of those statements. I love Nick Suzuki too much. I am too close to it. But still, like looking as a Team Canada fan, even, unless you're biased and like a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, you can't think that leaving Nick Suzuki off this team is a good decision. I'm sorry.
So, I mean, certainly in the way you and I had constructed Team Canada, we went a lot more heavy on skill, which we should have known that Hockey Canada tends to not do based on their recent constructions of World Junior rosters and of what we're expecting, by the way, at the World Juniors coming up.
Oh,
they
Jesus.
Kept
That's
away.
Even worse.
That I don't know. We'll probably get into that when they actually decide the teams, but like Hockey Canada made the same. By the way, the same reason they same reason they were disappointing in the previous tournament last year, it's going to carry over because they've shied away from a lot of skilled guys. How you keep Zane Parik away from even the training camp, like the initial like roster of 35, 40. Anyways, like sorry, complete sidebar. But let's focus on Suzuki. I feel very confident in this statement that this is the best hockey, or in the past couple weeks, that he has ever played. He does not have Kirby Dach on his line. He does not have Juraj Slafkovsky on his line. Those two guys are struggling mightily. in the past, a Nick Suzuki line without either of those players has never been one that has had tons and tons of possession. He is on a line with two smaller sized wingers, Alex Newhook.
Average height between 5'9" and 5'10". The smallest first line in hockey, definitely.
So despite that, they are crushing it, this line.
Yeah.
And look, Newhook is learning how to play a bit better with his speed and understand his pace a bit more. And he's figuring out the chemistry stuff too with Caufield, which is great. Caufield is Caufield. We know what he does. Great. And he's been adding little elements to his game here and there. Nick Suzuki has figured out a way to be a difference maker in the offensive zone when his line mates lose the puck, right? That has been the problem in the past. Well, problem might be strong, but like the concern in the past has been once a Nick Suzuki line, like they'll get an initial rush chance. And when you have Suzuki and Caufield and let's say Juraj Slafkovsky on the line, decent chance that puck goes in the net. You don't have to worry about it. The concern has been, well, when they lose that puck, unless they have a big bodied power forward, it's over. That's it. Back to the defensive zone and back checking. What I've seen in the past, 3 weeks or so is Suzuki's now figured out where he can win puck battles on the forecheck. It's in the middle of the ice. It's not on the boards. Big shocker, right? That the 5'11" guy who's built like a tank, but he's not going to destroy people on the boards. He's not going to win a puck from a 6'3" defender on the boards. Where he's going to win the puck, though, is on the exit passes. And he's been doing that a ton. He did that on Saturday night against Washington. He's been doing it for the past few weeks. That's what he's figured out recently. So to see him make that extra change now, I can only imagine what happens when not to put down Alex Newhook, but when there is better talent on the team, and not only on his own line, but a second line that's functioning properly, him having that figured out, and then if they can also win board battles, like it's all slowly coming together with Suzuki. It's the best hockey he's played. He's around point to game, over point to game, 6-game point streak.
Yep.
This is the best hockey he's ever played. That's why I found it really disappointing that he didn't make it, because you can't be looking at him as like, oh, he's just a skilled guy. Maybe we don't trust him defensively yet. And I had said on this podcast, like, I don't know if I've seen it enough defensively, but if he's figuring out the forecheck immediately after losing the puck, then that's one step closer to becoming a real 200-foot player. So that's the disappointing part, but I didn't want to shine some praise on like one element of the game that he's absolutely unlocked in the past month.
Absolutely. That's very, very well said, Jordan. That's an element that he needed to figure out on a line with two small guys who Caufield is a workhorse who, once the puck is lost, will go after that guy and lift his stick and try and get the puck away, but he's certainly not winning, big battles like that. Newhook, similar thing. But yeah, Nick Suzuki has definitely unlocked that. He's super sneaky in the offensive zone like that, just knowing where the next pass is going to be and not getting there early enough that the player adjusts, getting there just on time so that they can't adjust and he can intercept it. So brilliant hockey from Nick Suzuki everywhere on the ice. I want to talk about Newhook quickly because I do think that he has absolutely figured it out. His top, I guess, skill or his top ability that's making him such a factor is his pace. Suzuki and Caufield have a very high pace. Suzuki with his brain and Caufield with everything, basically. He's a quick skater, not like top speed, but in terms of acceleration and getting to pucks within a few feet, he's very, very quick. His hands are very quick. His shot is lethal. They needed another guy at that pace, and Newhook is that. Newhook is absolutely that. It's a shame he's 5'11". If he was 6'3", this would be the line for the next 10 years. But it is interesting also to look at this very short line, and then the second line is a very tall line, average 6'4". You switch Newhook for one of Slav, or I guess not. Yeah, it would have to be Slav or Laine because you're not putting Newhook at center, I don't think, on that second line. But we're going to get into the center stuff later. But a switch would sort of even that out. Which, am I being nitpicky, Jordan? Like, the first line's really working. The second line isn't working. They just seem slow. And, of course, Doc and Laine, like, Doc's played, 20-ish games now, so he should be getting quicker. Laine's just coming in. And Slav is not known for, super high speed. Am I nitpicking, or should we be looking for an interesting switch between the top two lines?
I think, for now, keep 13, 14, 15 together. And this will transition well into the next part of the episode, where we really are going to start digging in on that second line. So I think for now, like, first line, it's working. Don't touch it. But like we've been saying for the whole season, any line with Nick Suzuki at center has basically worked this year, and this new combination is no different. Maximizing Alex Newhook is certainly one thing the Canadiens needed to do better now than they did in the first 15 games or so. With that, let's jump into part 2 of the episode, We went a little long on part one, but I think it was some good discussion. In part two, we're going to do some fact or fictions. And Brian and I chose a few different statements that I think we've been seeing pretty commonly. Are these three statements from around Montreal Canadiens fandom, socials, just the conversation going on in the ecosphere right now. So, and we're coming in to provide our point of view, saying whether they're true or they're false, they're fact or they're fiction. The first one, the loudest one right now, Brian Wild is really beating the drum on this, and I think there's some very interesting conversations to be had here, Brian. Fact or fiction? The Montreal Canadiens need to trade for a second line center.
I'm putting this in fiction because of the word need, because I don't think it's a need right now. And the main argument for it, in my opinion, is that the proof is Dvorak. And the reason I say that is because he takes faceoffs to start overtime. He takes very important defensive zone faceoff and offensive zone faceoffs. He's in a lot of situations that Christian Dvorak should not be in, purely because he's a left-handed center. The same way that we are lacking in right-handed defensemen, we are lacking left-handed centers. I could go through the list of right-handed centers that the Montreal Canadiens have. You all know it, but might as well do it. Suzuki, Doc, Evans, and then we can go to like Kapanen, Beck, Michael Hage. Even the guys of the future are righties. On the left-hand side, it's Dvorak, it's Newhook in brackets, because as we're seeing, I don't think he works that well as a center unless he's lower in the lineup. Jared Davidson, another future bottom six if all goes well. And then Brandon Gignac, again, bottom six if all goes well. None of these guys are top-end left-handed centers. Now, I don't know if this is so much we need to trade for a 2C, so much as it's we need a left-handed center somewhere in the lineup who has some type of offensive ability so that Christian Dvorak can stick to the fourth line, play 10, 12 minutes. And the reason I think that it's still a no, like it's fiction for me, is that I don't think that happens this year. I think they're just going to write it out with Dvorak. His contract's going to end, and next year they're going to deal with it. So for this year, I think it's fiction.
So the main argument for this has been Kirby Dach has been extremely disappointing at center. And look, we'll break this open. Like the second fact or fiction is about Caden Primo. And maybe just briefly group them together, that the sentiment, the idea, the overarching thought is Dach and Primo are holding the team back right now from being a better squad. Primo, in terms of his, his games and how his quality and his goal, he's been bad this year. So park Primo for a moment though. Dach has been the same when you look at his productivity, his 5-on-5 play, that that second line is sinking right now. I think another point on top of that is, let's say it's fact. Okay. Habs need another top six center. Brian, I did a bit of digging. These are the centers that have been traded for, not drafted, not free agency, but traded for in the past 18 months. You tell me. I mean, there's quite a few of them, and this is like to the point of doing it. Like we always talk about, you and I, we love this statement of like the hardest position to fill is 1C. The second hardest position to fill in the team, the most important second most important position to fill is 2C. Right after that, we can talk right-handed defenseman, shut down D, power play guy, goalie, whatever.
Yeah.
So what's actually been moved in terms of acquiring a 2C? Is it feasible? These are the guys in the past 18 months, and I'm saying top six center. I'm being very loose with that terminology. Lars Eller, most recently, Ryan McLeod, Connor Geekie, Pierre-Luc Dubois, Evgeny Kuznetsov, Alexander Wenberg. So nothing great so far.
Yeah.
Now, the next group is, it's more closely related to the trade deadline. Expiring RFA, Casey Middlestat. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
now,
getting somewhere.
Bowen Byron in return. So ain't cheap.
No.
Sean Monahan, remember him. Now, expiring UFA got traded for a first round pick. Keep that in mind. Elias Lindholm. Okay. All right. Expiring UFA. Guess what he was also traded for? A first round pick. And then Mikael Granlund, I threw in there, part of the Mega Carlson trade. Okay, so Middlestat, Monahan, Lindholm, the three best guys, all expiring contracts, all cost either a really good NHLer or a first round pick. Canadians can obviously give up a first. They have the Calgary, Florida first, so that's not an issue. They're there, but I'm saying all of those guys are expiring and needing new contracts. My point is, no one is willingly going to give you a second line center just like that. Like, take him.
Of course.
Like, part of the list was like Ryan McLeod was traded for Matthew Savoy, if you want to include Matthew Savoy, but that's a 19-year-old, unproven. Connor Geekie is in the similar situation where he was part of a trade, but he is an unproven commodity. Is he a good top 6 center? We're going to find out. But like I tend to, like, part of me, and we haven't got into like the element of like, this is like a sink or swim season. And Andrew Berkshire mentioned this on Blue Sky. Like, it doesn't, and I've been echoing this too. Like, it doesn't have to be so binary of like, Doc is a failure. We need to get a new replacement. It's also about like, well, like, let's just give him time. Like, what is really the opportunity cost right now? That's part of the conversation. The other part is like, okay, well, what realistically can you be out there getting? And the answer is either an unproven 18, 19, 20-year-old center, maybe.
That's still going to cost you a first.
Yeah, well, like, so there's that, or it can be like, you can get a guy who's expiring at 27, 28, 29 years old.
Yeah.
And that will definitely cost you a first and more probably. So I think that needs to be part of the conversation if we're talking about it. So again, I do think you're right. The terminology of need to trade for two. I mean, everyone could do. I'd love to. They can, if they should, if they want to, if they can find one, do it. Obviously, who doesn't need more center depth in the NHL, right? Like, how many teams would actually be like, you know what? We actually don't need another top 6 center. We're full. We're good, guys. Like, it's like everyone will like to do it. So sure, go ahead, try. Sure, Hughes is doing that. They don't need to do it. It's very much more of like, we can take it easy. We know what we would like to get. And if the opportunity presents itself, let's go after it. But I think it's also okay taking your time with this year, especially with Doc, and kind of figuring out, is it working before you like completely give up on him as a center and find a different option. So those are my thoughts. So I think we're both leaning fiction on it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's fiction. I will say, if they do go that route, and they do, just make it a lefty. That's all I care about at this point. Like, my whole Dvorak spiel was just make it a left-handed center, because we don't have any.
Yeah. Well, the good news is the Canadiens have two good left. Well, I don't know if we're calling Demidov a left winger. I've seen both, but we got two good lefty power forwards that are fairly young.
Absolutely.
Slav and Demidov. So at least that part is covered. You have
totally.
Caufield on the other side. So wingers is decently balanced, but I take your point on the righty lefty issue. Well, not issue, like, just like note, like, keep this in mind going forward. Second, factor fiction. We've touched on it. Brian, factor fiction. Do the Habs need a replacement for Caden Primo? I will say, I touched on this last week briefly. I think this one's a closer, just like, this one's a lot like more 50-50, I think, than the previous one. What are your thoughts?
So prior to the very unfortunate Dobes injury, I would have said absolutely fiction. No question, this is fiction, because Hughes is ready for a call-up. He's 28. He's right in that spot where a goaltender who's playing really well in the A could come up and just keep progressing and get even better. He's right at that special window. And then Dobes gets the lion's share of starts in the A. And then he gets injured, very unfortunately. And at this moment, I don't know if it's come out or if you've seen anything. I personally have not seen any type of details as to the actual term of how long he's going to be out. But that complicates things. Now you can't call Hughes up because you've got an ECHL goaltender as your backup. You don't want to make him the starter yet. Like, maybe he's great as a backup in the A, but he's not ready to take the starter role. And then sending Primo down, which would shoot his confidence. He might get scooped up, but probably not. I think the chances of that are slim. His confidence is not really good right now. Him going down to the A, if that continues and he doesn't play well, then that doesn't help. Also, the Rocket are having an unreal season, so I think you want to prioritize the development of the players on that team as well. So I'm actually starting to lean fact here, Jordan. I think that based on the amount of starts he's gotten recently, which is practically zero, like if you're talking the last 2 weeks, he had one start that was because of a back-to-back, if I'm not
Boston,
misremembering that. It was just Boston. And like, he was okay, I guess, compared to the rest of his season. He was maybe a little better, but it wasn't a great game. I think the Habs hung him out to dry on certain scenarios, which made it look a lot worse. It made 6 goals, like it made what should have been a 3-4 goal against Knight turn into a 6. But still, 3-4 is not ideal either. So like, all in all, I think this is fact if your priority really is to stay in the mix. If you're looking at this more as a gone season, because even though we're only 5-ish points back of the wild card, there's about 12 teams that are in that same boat. So like, we're not going to beat all of them.
Yeah.
So it's fact if you want to stay in the mix. I think it's fiction if you don't care that much.
Again, top tier fence sitting by you, Brian.
Oh, damn it.
So,
okay, fact. You're
okay,
right.
no, I appreciate
my ass
that.
hurts from being on this fence. I'm sick of sitting on the fence. You're right. It's fact.
So a couple points. So Laval has started to lose their edge a little bit. So you definitely want to be mindful of that. Now, while going back, and Laval's been great since he got back. Yeah. So I think this one is very much subject to change. And it's unfortunately at the point where I said it last week. I'm like, I'd probably give them another month. But you saw it this week. The Canadiens had days off. And St. Louis was like, we got to ride Montembeault. Now, I don't know how sustainable it is if you want to play Monty 55, 60 games in the season. Like, you probably don't want to do that on a team not making the playoffs. So, yeah, it's tough right now for Primo. I understand like why people are ready to completely cut bait. I think it would have to be a trade, quite frankly, to your point about the Dobish injury. And you'd have to go outside the organization because you can't deplete Laval so much, especially in the short term. So that would be my thought. Like, and the other point is like, again, what is the point of the Caden Primo season? Like, is this like a prove it season? Is this a cut bait season? Is there any patience left with him? I don't know. I am on the spectrum here. I definitely last week I would have told you, maybe actually 2 weeks ago, I would have definitely told you fiction. And then based on he played poorly against Boston, you can't fault him. I appreciate you bringing up the fact that like Mike Matheson did not do him any favors a week ago against Boston, but at the end of the day, you do need to make some of those saves when your teammates mess up. That's why the goaltending position exists. So I think last week it kind of shifted more towards fact. And I think, again, based on the idea of like the schedule is going to get so hard in the next 6 to 8 weeks. And you just worry about like, are you putting Primo in there every 3-4 games and he just gets whacked each time? I think 2 or 3 more poor performances, and this is absolutely fact. I'm trying to avoid the fence sitting as well. I'll still say fiction for now, but damn, it's getting close.
Yeah.
Last one. It's a big one. It's a rough one to get into almost an hour into a podcast. But I think this falls along the lines of the discussion we've already been having about like how much patience should we have with Kirby Dach? How much patience should we have with Caden Primo? So the final fact or fiction for this episode, Brian, is the Montreal Canadiens should tank one more time.
This is going to be the fastest one yet from me, because we're getting up to an hour now and the episode is about to end. But also because the topic, I just, as all our listeners know, I hate Tank Nation. I think it's the most boring, lame ideology in the world of trying to be bad in order to secure a better draft pick. It teaches teams how to lose. It creates stagnation. It makes good players hate the team that they're on. It's not fair to Nick Suzuki. It's not fair to Cole Caufield. And then by extension of this, who exactly that's a vet that other teams would want do you trade away to get worse that doesn't impact you in the future? You could trade away Christian Dvorak. You could trade away Josh Anderson and Brendan Gallagher and David Savard and like Mike Matheson. Does that make your team much worse to the point where you're actually securing the first overall pick? Let's say
there's 2 guys in that part of it. You mentioned one, Mike Matheson. Yes, that would make them considerably worse.
Okay.
Especially considering how bad the 5th, 6th, and 7th defensemen have been this season.
Okay. I agree with that one.
The other guy you didn't mention, and I appreciate your terminology about like affecting the Habs in the future, is obviously Jake Evans. And maybe we can probably save the bigger Jake Evans discussion for later on. He's still playing awesome. There's definitely limited offensive capabilities. He had a few poor passes this week, but he also had a wicked snipe on the penalty kill. So Jake Evans doing Jake Evans things. Those would be the 2 guys. I think legitimately, if you're looking at it from that angle, where if you get rid of Jake Evans and Mike Matheson and you keep, this is part of the discussion, Caden Primo, this team's going to be much worse.
Okay. All right. I mean, we're 3rd from the bottom with the team that we have. What like,
watch out,
what
Nashville.
Are we talking about? Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I just find this so stupid. I hate that people want to trade Suzuki because yes, I've seen that from Habs fans, quote unquote Habs fans on the socials. Actually, not on the socials, on X, which is becoming a cesspool, which is why we've moved to Blue Sky.
Yeah.
But I've seen a bunch of people on X saying that they would trade Nick Suzuki because he's doing too much good for this team and he's already in his prime. And so we should move on because the next wave is Demidov and Hage and the 19-year-olds. So let's screw the entire first part of this rebuild so that we can get a better second half of the rebuild and restart. Like, are you guys nuts?
So
what the hell are we talking about here?
So here's this stuff makes my blood boil. You have two sets of people right now and they're forming. You can see the alliance is forming, right? Tank Nation is small right now. They're quiet. But they're still there, right? There's still a lot of people saying, oh, so we gotta move Evans, gotta move Matheson, move Dvorak, even though like Dvorak is worth nothing. And then you have the other
you move
side.
Him, the team gets better, honestly. So don't
might.
move Dvorak. Like,
So,
put him as your first line center. That's how you really tank.
I mean, if you bring up Lucas Condata, the team might get better. So the other side of the argument, this group's getting louder. Of like, okay, TikTok, let's go. You trade it again, like this is not binary. This is on a spectrum. You slowly progress from bad to good. You traded for Patrik Laine. That means you're trying to win right now. Like for the past couple of years, the Canadiens have shown time and time again, like they will trade draft picks for players. They are not like, and that is theoretically a move that a team that's trying to win does. They traded draft picks to get Kirby Dach. They traded draft picks to get Alex Newhook. They will keep doing such. Okay, it's not a binary thing. You don't need to tank. You don't need to go all in and like, we need to trade for, this is the whole point of this whole discussion, right? Like, need to trade for a second line center, need to get a backup, better backup goaltender. Like, don't worry about trading the picks right now. Like the team needs to get good. You have to like, it's the mistake that a lot of teams in a rebuild make is at this very moment where they say, okay, we got to go now. Like it's time. Yeah. And then when you start sacrificing, and we said this at the last draft, right? When they drafted Hage and Demidov and we're like, this is awesome. I emphasize, like, please make sure you still focus on the 25 draft and the 26 draft. For as long as you possibly can, the draft has to be your biggest night of the season. There will come a time where, like Edmonton or like Vegas, where you say, like, we don't care about these picks. Go. Get out of here. Bring in reinforcements for a playoff run. But for as long as you possibly can, hold on to the draft as, like, your main way of team building. The Canadiens are absolutely still in that territory. They got Patrik Laine for free. Like, so, like, that was like that's a bit of a slight to Jordan Harris, but yeah, fair enough. Like Harris
that's
was
a lopsided.
The second round pick was Harris. I'm like, that's how I'm doing
yeah,
it.
okay, all right, fair enough.
Jordan Harris, second round pick, that's fair. That's good value.
Yeah,
fair enough on
okay.
both sides. Patrik Laine was free. No shots fired to Jordan Harris. I wish he was having a better season in Columbus. Maybe we can welcome you back home. But like, yeah, it doesn't have to be all or nothing at one point. Hughes and Gordon are great because they are always assessing their options. They know the general direction the team is heading in, and they will make moves based on what options appear, right? It's why they never fully went in on Pierre-Luc Dubois, because the option never fit perfectly, right? And it's why they got Michael Hage, because they saw options to move up in the draft and be patient and get him in the draft. And Patrik Laine is the same thing, and Kirby Dach and Alex Newhook. Like, these options, like, they do their work, but they present themselves, and then you make the decision because the team is always moving forward. They drafted Ivan Demidov. Like, the best player on this hockey team is 18 years old. We don't have to focus on everyone between 22 and 27 right now. You can take your time. This is not the year where you have to start being like, no, we have to win now. It's enough. We have to get the 85 points. If not, it's a failure. Like, we can chill a bit. I understand. Like, and that's the conversation about Primo of like, time might be up on Primo really soon. For a lot of people, time's already up. So with some people with Kirby Dach at center, time is already up. I'm just like, just put a few more minutes on the timer. That's all. Like, it's about the opportunity cost. What is it?
What's
really?
The rush?
They're not making the playoffs. Who cares? Whether they finish with 89 points, 84 points, 78 points, it doesn't matter. If you answer questions that you need to get to go to the next step, that's great. If we know at the end of this year, we look at Kirby Dach, who is in theory eligible for a contract extension, and it's just like, I don't think it's happening. Well, that's a great answer to know going into the offseason. You look at Kaden Primo, and again, the answer might be known right now, but you're like, he's not the guy. He's not the backup. Great. Now we know that answer. Those are important things to figure out. There's still time. I don't understand the absolute need for a rush right now, because potentially Dach and potentially Primo, and I'm sure people will be disappointed with Struble or with Barron at different points of the season, but like, the opportunity cost is so small right now. They can still afford to be patient and react accordingly when options present themselves. I know I just went on for a long time there, Brian. But generally, does my logic make sense to you?
I mean, it makes sense to me because I think I'm a pretty rational person. I don't know if it'll make sense to this fan base that wants everything now, whether that be let's be in the mix for playoffs or let's be last in the league. But there's a nice, pretty comfy gray area in between those two things where a team can sit for a few seasons and get better. You drew our attention several weeks ago to the Colorado Avalanche's 5th season, I believe, where they had something like 47 points. And then they win the cup. They have Makar and McKinnon and all these incredible pieces. We're going to have some great pieces in Demidov, in Slavkovsky, who those who have given up on Slavkovsky, hilariously stupid. Just get out of the conversation, please. All of these incredible players, and Laine at 26, who for the next several seasons is going to keep scoring like a madman, and he's going to learn a ton from Martin St. Louis, and this positive environment's going to help him a ton. And Suzuki's just going to keep getting better. And oh my God, Owen Beck looks like a gem. So even if we have to trade Evans because someone offers us a first plus, because that's what he's worth to a playoff contender who doesn't have a defensive center in their bottom 6 like Jake Evans, which is most teams, by the way, because Evans is a gem. There's so much time here that we could spend waiting for good things to happen. You don't have to jump on everything right away. That's the way I feel about this. So I think that your viewpoint is correct. I think that regardless if we try to or not, we will be at the bottom of the league this year.
Yeah.
And it might be not bottom 5. Like if this team improves significantly and starts playing better hockey, and maybe one or two of the moves that we've discussed, such as Primo or something like that, does occur and we improve and we end up 8th from the bottom or something, there's still going to be a gem that nobody wanted in the 8th spot. You know, we managed to find Caufield at 15. We managed to find Demidov at 5. So I think we're still going to end up with a really good draft pick. We have a lot of draft capital elsewhere, so we can make another Hage-like pick where you get just, oh my God, he went 20-something? That's crazy. You can make another one of those. We have options to trade. There's contracts expiring this year, so signing another guy like Laine in the offseason, that's a real possibility. Another top-end player, maybe a right-handed defenseman. There's going to be so many options that you don't have to do anything right now.
Yeah, agreed. And maybe to close out, 2 final things. One is, and we've mentioned this on social media, and I will mention it again because it bears repeating. I am buying all the Kirby Dach stock that people are selling right now. Prices are basically at an all-time low, at least as a Hab. Stock's at an all-time low. I'm buying it all. I'm not ready to give up on this guy. A lot of other people are, or they're saying, oh, maybe as a winger. I'll buy it all. Give it to me. I'm taking it. I'm sure you'll take some of it too.
Oh, hell yeah. I'm in. He got injured. He missed a whole year. A significant injury. He missed a whole year. Can we have a little patience, please, with Kirby Dach?
And then last thing before we close out, a little pat on the back to both of us. We went a whole episode without saying the word Laine or Hudson. So well done. He's awesome.
Did we really?
Yep. Laine is going to finish his career. I think he's on pace for like 700 assists in his career and not scoring a goal. But hey, he'll catch Larry Robinson one day. Okay. Well, you know what? Fun ending to the episode. We love doing some fact or fiction, really diving into what people are talking about outside of the games. Because, the games matter to an extent, but overall, the team building process, as we get one more year into the rebuild, which did not start in 2018. But anyways, that'll do it for this week's episode of This Week in Habsland. We'll be back next Monday to keep talking Habs. You can find us on social media at Blue Sky and TikTok at HabslandPod. And if you like what you hear, please feel free to leave a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Until next Monday, go Habs.